Planet Earth in sight. Prepare for invasion.
We got no time for this. It's an alien invasion, Cor.
What aliens, Thor?
What we got? The alien Jordan, man.
What the fuck are they doing? What are they doing with yours, Thor?
They got guns, dude.
Where the fuck are they going, Thor?
I'm out, man. I'm out.
Okay.
Yalla, it's PK. PK. Hello, kids. I'm back with yet another Donald Duck game. PK Out of the Shadows for the PS2 and Gamecube. Though I'll be focusing on the Gamecube version. The game is also known as Donald Duck PK, but you know what? I'm just gonna call it Donald Duck PK Out of the Shadows. That way, everybody's happy. Except me, because I had to play the game. But first, it's time for Donald Blade History with Captain Psychopath. You see, back in 1969, in Italy of all places, children were getting sick of reading Donald Duck comics where Donald always ends up the loser. A bit weird considering that's the whole point of Donald, but I digress. So a couple of guys named Guido Martina and Giovan Battista Carpi said fuck it and turned Donald Duck into a superhero named Paperinik. The name comes from a mix of a popular superhero at the time and the Italian word for duck, Paperino.
Actually, it's Gosling.
This proved to be rather popular, so now we have a video game based on it. This has been Donald Blade History with Captain Psychopath. Now back to the game. As with most games, the first thing you see after booting it up and seeing all the company logos are the title screen and the menu. However, the start menu here is odd. Pretty much every time you click something, the music stops and the screen goes black to load. Well, this game isn't off to a great start, but hey, it's just a menu, it doesn't matter too much. After finally starting the game, we're exposed to a pre-rendered cutscene and we truly get to learn the meaning of video compression. Behind all the pixelization and blurriness, the cutscene shows us that an armada of alien ducks are on their way to invade Earth. And whoever made this cutscene decided that making it look like a comic book was a good idea. It was not. And as if space and spaceships weren't exciting enough for ya, here's a building where everybody's favorite duck is currently working in. Donald seems to have gotten himself a job as a nighttime security guard, but being a lazy asshat, he falls asleep. While sleeping, he has a weird dream where Daisy and those three annoying kids taunt him.
Oh, Donald, you've got to control your temper, or I don't know what I'm gonna do with you.
What's going on?
Don't get mad at me. You're the one with the temper. And another thing.
Uncle Donald got punished by Daisy again.
So he comes to the conclusion that he wants to be a superhero to prove them wrong. How does he plan to do that? Doesn't matter. A green floating British duckhead abducts him.
So, you'd like to be a superhero, hmm?
What?
I'll take that as a yes.
What?
And after some comedic fuck-ups, he gives Donald Duck a superhero costume and the name PK, alongside a new voice somehow.
What is a PK?
We don't have time for this now. I'll explain later.
Well, time to go kill some aliens. Anyways, this is where the game actually starts. On the surface, Donald Duck PK Out of the Shadows seems like it's going to be your typical PS2 era platformer with cartoony graphics. But it turns out it's actually a mix between a third-person shooter and a platformer. How does this work? Well, it doesn't. As soon as you start playing the game, you'll think to yourself, something doesn't feel right. I mean, it could work, Ratchet & Clank did a pretty good job, but here, let's go through the problems. PK, that is Donald Duck, feels sluggish to control. His running speed is too slow in comparison to his running animation, making it feel floaty. It's hard to explain why exactly this happens, but he just feels incredibly slow. On top of that, his jumps are also way too low, and they slow down your momentum to a halt. Oh yeah, and there's no double jump, meaning that to reach high ledges you have to grab onto them. This is of course done automatically by PK, and doesn't always work. You seemed a lot more versatile when you weren't a superhero, Donald. Then there's the shooting. PK has a metal glove thingy on his right hand, which can be used as a gun because, of course it can. To shoot it, you press B. Doesn't sound that bad, right? However, you can't actually aim. Instead, what you have to do is press and hold the right trigger to lock on. And you can change between targets with the C-stick. That too is technically fine. The real problem is that even the weakest of enemies take 5 hits before dying. 5! And these are the weakest enemies. Plus the rate of fire is incredibly slow, which in turn isn't helped by the frame rate that goes from 60 to around 15 pretty much every time you engage in combat. All this means that combat simply boils down to holding down R and mashing B while you sit there silently praying for this all to be over. But it's never over. Though you can find temporary power-ups that give you a finite amount of stronger ammo, this doesn't really help all that much, especially in the later stages. But, you know, it's something. And another problem also surfaces once you get upgrades. You see, even though the game was developed with the PS2 and GameCube in mind, the developers decided that using the same button for every upgrade was a good idea. And which button did I choose? The same button you use to shoot, of course. Why would you do this? There are so many other buttons to choose from, but no, let's just put everything on B. What this does in terms of gameplay is that you often end up wasting some of your precious limited powered up ammo when you're trying to use one of the upgrades. Speaking of upgrades though, you get several throughout the game, such as a laser rope to swing with, a remote controlled thing you put into vents to kill fuse boxes, a kind of floating ability, and a handful of other things. They're all pretty contextual to be honest, and most of them don't really add too much to the gameplay. Then there's the charge shot. In the later stages, enemies get shields that your standard weapons can't penetrate. To disable their shields, you have to hit them with a charge shot. But this being PK out of my asshole, you have to do this at least 3 times before the enemies have the decency to die. Plus, they can attack you while you're charging up a shot, interrupting your charge, yet still depletes the ammo bar. I can't quite articulate just how frustrating this is, but it's not fun. The stages themselves though are pretty standard business. They're fairly linear corridors with enemies to kill and some platforming challenges. Like most games, they all have checkpoints, but this game is a bit weird. You have to collect 15 green orbs to use them. But to be honest, all the stages are very forgettable. Scattered throughout every level are kidnapped scientists you can collect, I mean rescue. Why were they kidnapped? What do they help you with? I don't know and I don't care. It didn't really seem to impact anything. And if you should miss any, well, too bad, because in this game you can't replay the levels. At the end of every level, there's surprisingly no boss fight. No, the levels just end. I'd complain, but this might actually be a good thing. However, there is one boss fight in the game.
Actually, there's 2. Sorry about that. It's a very forgettable game.
And it is, of course, the big bad alien leader. What's his name? Who gives a shit?
So, how can this be possible? One measly little person causing so much trouble. Come, bow before the mighty General Zondag, or feel my wrath.
The only thing I'm gonna feel is the ground shake after I knock you out. I'm gonna make sure your face hits the ground nice and hard.
The boss fight is pretty much a culmination of all the previous enemy encounters, just harder and less fun somehow. This means that the fight is pretty damn awful, and to be honest, I'm getting kind of sick of talking about this game. It leaves a pit like in my stomach, and I just feel I don't want to do this anymore. Donald Duck PK Out of the Shadows is a game best left in the shadows.